Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Jason flicked his wrist, feeling the haptic feedback of the game controller pulse through his fingers. His visor displayed a red dot on the distant horizon, slowly shifting toward Hema, an alien creature he'd been tracking for hours, hidden among the dense foliage of the virtual jungle. He crouched behind a tree, the sleek body of his virtual rifle in his hands, every breath synchronized with the pulsating sounds of his heartbeat. This was his life. Hunter wasn't just a game, it was an escape. Jason had spent years building his reputation in the vast expanse of this digital universe. Here, he wasn't the nobody with a dingy apartment and unpaid bills. Here, he was a master of the hunt, feared and respected by players across the globe. Jason Maverick, the ultimate hunter. But something had changed recently. It wasn't the game's mechanics or the AI, it was the creatures. They had begun to feel a broken bar, different, more intelligent, less predictable. Some even looked eerily familiar in ways he couldn't shake off. He noticed their eyes, the way they seemed to watch him, assess him, like a real animal would in the wild. The red dot moved again, closer this time. Jason took aim, steadying his breath. His visor zoomed in, focusing on the alien's hulking form, a part reptile, part insect, with sharp mandibles and scales that shimmered under the artificial light. He'd seen thousands of these creatures before, but this one felt different. He squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the virtual jungle, and the creature let out a shriek before collapsing to the ground in a heap of twitching limbs. Jason stood up, approaching cautiously. He'd learned early on that Hunter could throw curveballs, especially when a kill seemed too easy. As he reached the creature, a strange unease settled in his stomach. It lay still, its body lifeless, but its eyes remained open-wide, and disturbingly aware. The reflection of the virtual sun gleamed in its pupils as if it were a broken bar waiting. Jason froze, unsure whether it was a glitch or something deeper. For the first time, he hesitated. "What are you?" he thought, staring into the creature's lifeless gaze. The alarm on his console buzzed. Jason pulled off the VR visor, blinking as reality bled back into focus. His dingy apartment came into view, the half-empty cans of energy drinks, the unmade bed, and the faint hum of his computer's cooling system. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake the lingering feeling that something wasn't right. That creature, he thought, turning to the screen. He did a quick search, trying to find any mention of that species on the game's forums, but nothing came up. He sighed, logging off for the night. Sleep could wait. There was something off about the game, and he needed answers. 2 days later, Jason was on his way to the grocery store when a news report flashed on a screen at the corner of a busy intersection. His eyes caught the headline, "Unidentified creature found near National Forest." He stopped in his tracks, turning to get a better look. The camera footage showed a large, reptilian body being carried away by a team of military personnel. Jason's breath caught in his throat. The creature on the screen was nearly identical to the one he had killed in Hunter just days before. Same mandibles, same shimmering scales. His stomach twisted as the reporter speculated about its origins. A government experiment gone wrong? Some new species of animal? Jason couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. He wasn't imagining it. The creature he killed in the game existed in real life. How? He rushed home, his mind racing with possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Back in his apartment, he spent hours digging into obscure corners of the internet, searching for anyone who might have noticed the same phenomenon. Forums, conspiracy sites, everything. Finally, he found a post buried in a discussion thread from years ago. It was vague, but someone else had seen it too, an alien creature from Hunter appearing in the real world. The post was dated 3 years earlier, but there were no follow-up comments. No discussions. It was as if no one else had noticed. He bookmarked the page, his pulse quickening. There was more to this than a simple coincidence. Jason wasn't ready to go public with what he had found. Not yet. He didn't want to be labeled as crazy, but he needed to know more. That night, He logged into Hunter again, diving deeper into the game than ever before. He pushed through mission after mission, hunting down creatures he hadn't encountered in months. Each time he faced one, he studied it carefully, noting its movements, its behaviors, its eyes. The eyes haunted him most. They weren't like any eye he'd ever seen. Too real, too aware. And then he found her. Lena Stark was a name he'd heard whispered in the game's highest ranks. She was a legend in Hunter, a player who was rumored to have hacked the game's code, uncovering hidden missions and creatures no one else had access to. Jason had never believed the stories until now. It took him hours to find her in the game's vast universe. When he did, she was waiting in an abandoned spaceship, her avatar perched on the edge of a broken window, staring into the digital abyss. "Jason Maverick," she said, not looking at him. "I figured you'd come eventually." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't told anyone what he was investigating, but somehow, she knew. "I need answers," he said, stepping forward. Lena turned to face him, her eyes glowing a deep, unnatural red. "You're not ready for them," she replied. "But you will be." Jason's pulse quickened as Lena's words sank in. "What do you mean, I'm not ready?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. But his mind was spinning. He was in too deep now, chasing a trail that was becoming darker and more dangerous than he had anticipated. She stood slowly, her avatar's figure glitching slightly as if the code itself was struggling to contain her presence. "Hunter isn't what you think it is," she said, walking past him, her gaze fixed on something far beyond the game's world. "It never was." Jason followed her, his hands gripping the virtual rifle tighter than necessary. "I've already seen things," he said, his voice firmer. "Creatures from the Gamma Broken Bar there in the real world." Lena stopped. "I know. They've been crossing over for years." She turned to face him, her eyes locking onto his. "The game is a testing ground. A simulation, yes, but also a gateway. Everything you hunt here, it exists, somewhere, out there, in our universe. The aliens who built this Gamma, they're using it to study us, to figure out how we react, how we fight." Jason felt the ground shift beneath him, like the game's reality was crumbling away to reveal something far more sinister. "Aliens?" he repeated, the word tasting foreign on his tongue despite all the time he'd spent hunting virtual creatures. "Not just aliens," Lena said. "An invasion. The game is preparing us, or rather, it's preparing them. They watch every move we make, learn from every kill. Every creature you've hunted they've been watching, and soon, they'll come for real." Jason's head spun. He wasn't ready to believe it, but the pieces were fitting together in a way that terrified him. "How do you know all of this?" he asked. Lena's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and resignation. "I've been inside the code, deep. There's a layer to this game that only a few of us have ever accessed. It's not just about skill, it's about unlocking the truth. The deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't a game at all." Jason shook his head. "But why? Why would they do this? Why not just invade?" "They are," she said. Slowly, carefully. "They're studying us first, making sure they know exactly how to break us. And we're giving them everything they need." A cold sweat broke out on Jason's forehead, even though the game's physical feedback was supposed to be muted. He could feel the fear crawling up his spine. "So, what do we do? How do we stop them?" Lena turned back toward the broken window, her voice softer now, almost lost in the background hum of the virtual space. "There's a way," she said. "But it won't be easy. The aliens embedded themselves deep into Hunter's system. If we're going to stop them, we'll have to go deeper than anyone has gone before. We have to shut down their command center within the game." Jason's mind raced. "And then what?" "We shut it down in the game, and the invasion just a broken bar stops?" "If we're lucky," Lena said with a bitter smile, "but it's a chance. It's the only chance we have. If they launch a full-scale invasion before we're ready, we won't stand a chance." Jason felt the weight of her words. The game had always been an escape, but now, It felt like a prison, a trap set by something far beyond human understanding. And yet, he couldn't turn away. "When do we start?" he asked, his voice steady, even though every instinct told him to run. Lena glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Now," she said. They spent the next several hours hacking into the deepest layers of Hunter. Lena guided Jason through encrypted tunnels of code, bypassing firewalls and traps set to keep players out of the game's true core. As they delved deeper, the game began to warp around them. The familiar environments of alien planets and digital jungles twisted into abstract landscape as places where nothing made sense and the laws of physics didn't apply. Jason's breath hitched as they entered a zone he had never seen before. It was cold, metallic, and vast, like a futuristic city built on a forgotten moon. The air crackled with static, and Jason's HUD flickered, glitching out every few seconds. He knew this was no longer just a game. "We're close," Lena said, her voice tight with concentration. "This is the command center, the heart of their operation. If we can disable it, we disrupt their entire network." Jason scanned the area. Dozens of alien figures stood in the distance, their forms sleek and towering, unlike any of the creatures he had encountered in the game. These were mindless monsters programmed for a hunt. These were soldiers. They moved with precision and intelligence, guarding the core of their invasion. "We'll have to fight our way through," Jason muttered, gripping his rifle. The weapon felt heavier now, more real. The stakes had never been higher. Lena nodded. "Stay close, don't take unnecessary risks." They moved in tandem, slipping through the shadows, picking off the guards one by one. Each alien they killed vanished in a puff of pixels, but Jason knew that the consequences were real. Every shot mattered. The deeper they went, the more resistance they faced. Aliens swarmed them from all sides, their weapons firing plasma bolts that left scorch marks on the digital terrain. Jason fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, his every move calculated, precise. This wasn't just about winning a game anymore. This was survival. They finally reached the center of the alien base. A massive structure loomed before them, pulsating with energy. It was the quarry at the core, the source of the invasion. Lena stepped forward, her fingers flying across the virtual interface, hacking into the core's systems. "I need a few minutes," she said, her voice strained. Jason stood guard, fending off wave after wave of alien reinforcements. His heart pounded in his chest, each kill bringing him closer to exhaustion. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Almost 3 broken bar." Lena's voice crackled through the comms, barely audible over the chaos. Suddenly, the core began to tremble. The ground beneath them shook violently, and the air filled with a deafening hum. Jason staggered, trying to keep his balance as the core's energy spiked. "It's done," Lena shouted, her voice triumphant. "We've shut it down." But Jason barely had time to celebrate. The core exploded in a blinding flash of light, and everything went black. When Jason awoke, he was no longer in the game. He was lying on the floor of his apartment, the VR visor still strapped to his head. His body ached, his mind foggy. He ripped the visor off, blinking as the real world slowly came into focus. It was over. He turned on the news, his heart racing. The reports were coming in. The alien creatures had vanished, disappearing from the real world as suddenly as they had appeared. The invasion was over, at least for now. Jason leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. They had done it. They had stopped the invasion. But at what cost? Lena was gone. Her avatar had vanished when the core exploded, and there had been no sign of her since. Jason wasn't sure if she was alive, or if she had sacrificed herself to save them all. But he knew one thing for certain: the game wasn't over. The threat was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As Jason stared at the blank screen, he realized that his world, both virtual and real, would never be the same. The lines between them had blurred, and there was no going back. The hunt had only just begun.